Here we can see the main menu for the Strategos demo. In the demo, the campaigns and reenactments are not enabled, but you can of course still play the tutorial and the battle simulator. You can also link to the manual here from the main menu, which includes both the text for the rules of the game, as well as the POA charts for impact, melee, and shooting points of advantage. There's also a link here to a quick start guide in PDF form and to the Steam page. And then finally, there's also the settings, where you can change the volume, music, you can mute the music. There are some in-game camera controls like double-click movement and screen edge movement. There's resolution, screen modes, and so on. If you're struggling with performance, you can use small unit sizes here, or you can elect to turn dust and grass on or off. There are also key rebinds, so for the camera, for selections, and so on, you can rebind different keys. So we'll go to the battle simulator. Here's the demo note, just explaining that although there's over 100 factions in the final game, and many other battle options, the demo only includes 4 factions: Plebeian Roman, late Carthaginian, Pyrrhic, and the late successor era Macedonians, as well as only 3 maps and other limited options. The options you do have available are being able to switch which side you play on, to use a close or far deployment. If you choose random armies, you can choose whether or not you want that to include allies in the random. You can set the AI to being balanced, aggressive, cautious, or a random selection from among those. Let's choose balanced for now. You can also choose difficulty that either gives you or your opponent more or less units, in the red highlighted, or makes their quality higher. But let's keep those to default for now. Let's play as Pyrrhic and choose Samnite allies, like perhaps we're invading southern Italy, and we'll go against the Plebeian Romans and give them no allies for now. There are also selections here. If a selection has this double arrow symbol, then there are multiple options for units in that selection. And you can also have a unit panel here for when you hover a unit and you want a larger description. Then finally, you can select the map and click Start to start the battle. Hello, welcome to a quick video tutorial on the basics of Strategos. Let's jump right in. Here we're playing as the Plebeian Romans against the Carthaginians. We are in deployment mode, so you can see these black deployment boxes for each side, and you can see the start button here. We will remain in deployment mode until we select start. You can see on hover, you get unit information on each unit, including the type and subtype. This is a heavy infantry subtype impact foot, the number of men in the unit, whether they are disciplined, their ratings for impact and ongoing combats, whether they are ranged and what type of ranged weapon they have, their armor level, whether they are restrained or impetuous, their veterancy, and whether they are currently hindered. And that last one is the foot there. Heavy infantry units, for example, or cavalry will be hindered by being in terrain. So we can hover over this. We can see that this terrain is severely disordering. It provides concealment and cover. If you select a single unit and hover, you can see the specific conditions for that unit. It is hindered by this terrain. Whereas, for example, light infantry are not hindered by this terrain. Units move more or less immediately while in deployment, so you can place them initially where you like so. You right-click and drag to move units, both in-game and while in deployment. Light infantry types like this are in a dispersed formation and will skirmish. Cavalry like this will evade or not, depending on how they like a given matchup. And non-light infantry like this do not evade. You can move... these can be rebound in the settings and the keybind settings, but you can move the camera with your mouse 3 command like this, or you can elect to move at the screen edge or with double click movement like so. So now I have screen edge movement or double click movement. I'll turn those off now. You can also move with WASD. You can rotate with E and Q. There is a pivot rotation input. I have it set to right click, but by default it's middle mouse click. You can pan around with mouse 3. If you hold Alt and pivot, then you will pivot in place. And if you hold Alt and Shift and pivot, then you will look around wherever you put your mouse, so you can zoom down to a spot quickly and look around from there. If you don't like how large these tooltips are, you can use minimize tooltips, so it just shows the unit name and type and number of men in the unit. You can also turn off all UI if you like, except for these corner bits. And you can elect to keep the state icons on or not for later once those are displaying in combat. If you right-click a unit card, you can bring up this unit details panel. And of course, when you hover the cards, you get the same information from when you hover the unit. There is the manual in-game, which comes with these POA charts for deeper information on unit types and their matchups, and a review of all of the controls and some general advice. If you pivot the camera all the way up like this and zoom out a bit, you can see we convert to this top-down overlay with topographic map. Now let's go ahead and start the battle. I'm going to move these men in formation here, so I'll set my cavalry to walk. Now if I hold Alt and then right-click, I get this effect, so I can move them as a group, and I can even use rotate to change their orientation. Release and move. Move this here. All units, their first move is free so long as no combats have resolved yet. But after that, if they are outside of a general's command radius, which is these blue circles, they have to receive a courier to move. So if we, say, move my general back here and get a few units outside of the command radius, we can see a courier move. If a unit has a courier en route, so we'll move these velites, they don't react immediately because they have to wait for a courier, which is indicated by this icon here. And the total number of couriers available is indicated in the bottom left here. Now that they've received the courier, they will go to that move. Whereas a unit already inside the command radius, or a general's unit itself, will react immediately. So these triarii here will react as soon as I give them a command, and don't have to wait for a courier. You can see the light troop skirmishing here. There's the state icons, which can be toggled on and off. But red state icons mean a unit is uncommandable. So I was being charged there, then I evaded. Then their light cavalry evaded my heavy infantry. Let's pause for a moment and discuss cohesion states. Units can be steady, which means their faction-colored flag. They can be disordered like this, and you'll get a notification showing that a unit is disordered, and the flag will be yellow with a D on it. They can be fragmented, which is one more below disordered, and then the flag will be black and have an F. Or they can be routed and the flag will turn white. And once a unit is routed, unless it rallies, it will eventually disperse and no longer be commanded. As units drop cohesion level, their fighting effectiveness is reduced, especially certain units like pikemen and lancers who are very dependent on having good order to fight well. Ultimately, what you want to do is force enemy units to rout. You don't have to kill all of them. They will generally rout either from dropping cohesion states or from auto-breaking from casualties long before they are all killed. You can see here as well this hindrance icon, which is this foot, because these cavalry units are overlapping one another. So any mounted unit or any non-light unit, so that would be light mounted, non-light infantry, and non-light cavalry, that overlap one another will hinder each other. Lightfoot do not, so lightfoot skirmishers can fall back through their own line and not hinder them. Heavy infantry and cavalry are also hindered as discussed by terrain. Mounted and pikes are severely hindered by terrain, which is even worse. So let's continue the battle. Bring some of my cavalry around and some of my triarii. Let's see. Here we can see that this is the impetuous charge overlay. Generally, you can only immediately charge enemies that are at or near this overlay here. So I could immediately charge, they would probably evade. These light cavalry with my Hastati, but these Powini armored cavalry are too far away for me to immediately charge. And so if I were to right click to attack, it would be a move to attack, which is, it will then display there. So I'm moving to attack this unit. They've attacked me first, so they charge up the hill. This meter will count all the way down once a combat is resolved. So the combat has been resolved. Their cavalry was defeated and in fact dropped 2 levels. So you can see there the reason for the lost cohesion is that they lost close combat, and close combat means impact or melee. Let's toggle back our complex tooltips on. If you click a unit and then hover the enemy it's in combat with, the last resolved combat will display. You can see here the POA, or points of advantage. This is how combats are determined, with a win, tie, and loss chance based on the relative POA. So my foot javelin on impact versus mounted enemies for my Hastati have a plus 100, plus a plus 10 for left adjacency. You can see that they are adjacent to their allies on the left there. These Principes here. That's what this blue arrow means. It means that their left flank is protected because an ally is close enough there. And they also get a POA bonus. And they had a significant height advantage because you can see they were uphill, which gave them an advantage in the combat as well. So they had a final POA of 160 against the enemy POA of only 30, because these cavalry not only had a base POA of 100, but that POA was halved by being unsteady. They were overlapped with some of their allies. And being hindered also reduces the final POA by 40%. So especially for mounted units and spear and pike units, being hindered not only reduces the base POA, but then reduces the final PA by a certain percentage. So they had only a 8.75% chance of winning, whereas we had a 73.75% chance of winning. You can also see combat outcomes in the combat log, and if you want to filter it, you can filter it by unit number here. Of course, there's only one combat outcome so far. If you like, you can also increase the size of the UI or decrease it. So if it's easier for you to read larger tooltips or smaller tooltips and flags, and then this will reset the UI size. You can also set a minimum zoom, which will prevent you from zooming in all the way in if you prefer, or a thick lasso, so the selection lasso is thicker and easier to read. You can disable text pop-ups as well if you find those unimmersive. You can use a post-processing effect if you like. Set the music volume, mute the music, and those camera controls. There's also this after-action report, which fills out as the game goes on, with total kills, with how many units you've routed, with initial manpower, and so on. Checking our overhead again here, we can get a good idea of the overall battle situation. You can see that this cavalry, because they are in a commandable state, has this large blue radius within which units will react immediately. Whereas this cavalry unit is charging, so in an uncommandable state, its blue radius is very small, indicating that it cannot send couriers. Its blue radius is very small, indicating that although it can send couriers, it cannot give any immediate commands while in a combat state. So it's important to think about when and where you commit your generals. And you know this unit is a general because it has this star over the flag, which you can also see in the zoomed out state. You can see the star indicating it's a general. Other information on the flags includes if a unit is firing, if a unit is under fire, these 3 arrows coming down, unit's veterancy, these are elite triarii, veteran Principes, here's some veteran Powini armored cavalry, and so on. You can also see how much ammunition a ranged unit has left with this blue bar Once units are on half ammo, that blue bar turns red, and so does the shooting icon, and they shoot at half effectiveness. And once they are out of ammunition, those icons turn black. Generally speaking, you want to try and flank units like this. Non-light cavalry units will auto-drop, that is auto-cohesion drop an enemy that they flank, except for elephants. Infantry will auto-drop other infantry that are polearm units, like spears or pikes, but they will only have an advantage but not an auto-drop against non-polearm infantry. And elephants will automatically drop anything that they flank. Auto-drops are very potent. You can also see these red lines here, indicating morale support. So a close-by general's unit gives a morale bonus to nearby allies. Now this enemy has routed. That flank was an auto drop. So they are routing there. You can see with the white flag. They're not commandable. They could potentially rally if they were inside of the command radius of an allied general. But if they are constantly pursued, they can't rally and will take losses while being pursued. You can also see that now that my unit is pursuing and out of combat, my non-light units are overlapping each other, and so they'll hinder each other for that brief chaotic moment. You can also see that my unit has just dropped from cohesion. We might wonder why. It dropped cohesion from shooting. They got a +1 from a general nearby, a -1 from being hindered, but they nonetheless failed to pass the test, being shot at likely by these Numidian light cavalry. And you can see here the pursuing state. My equites are not commandable while they're pursuing, so they won't react to my commands. And the final overlay is this projectile overlay, where you can see the range of all your units, and you can see which targets they have, and selected units become orange. In addition to the move commands, you can also toggle a unit's speed or give it a stop command. These numbers popping up here are casualties, so 16 deaths there, 5 here. You'll see those from shooting, from charges, and so on, as they're resolved. And that's an auto-drop flank in for us against their cavalry. Their general was also killed, which you can see because his stars turned black, which also causes a cohesion test, a check for all nearby allies. And it reduces the future effectiveness in combat of that general, removes its ability to provide morale support, and greatly reduces the number and quality of couriers it can use. Here you can see my velites. Light foot units, when overlapped by enemy non-light infantry, will automatically drop. They don't like to stand and fight, so they need to evade. It's bad when they get trapped like that. They'll like to be destroyed. You can give waypoints by holding control. So if you want to move a unit around to take a flank like that, you can. You can give manual attack charges from close distances. But it's very common for units to take charges on their own. See, my Principes have taken the initiative here to take this flank. Their cavalry has moved in to take the flank of those Principes, and then my cavalry, well, now we've won, will take the flank of those infantry. Here you can see an overview of which units you have and which the AI has, and their cohesion state. And of course the after action report again now filled out with all the information up until this point. You can exit out of that and continue playing after you've won if you like, to clean up the enemy army. There was an automatic charge because of the close distance. You can see that when the cursor is a sword there. See, these cavalry are recoiling. One of the ways that cavalry are more mobile than other units is that, unlike infantry, they can recoil from combat so long as they aren't flanked. And then they can move again to fight elsewhere once they're finished recoiling. But the recoil itself is also an uncommandable state. Now they finish recoiling and I can move them again. These cross swords mean the two units are in ongoing combat. You can see there they had both fallen back into mutual melee passive, where combats aren't resolved, but the two sides might fling projectiles at each other. That's part of the command simulation. And units that aren't flanked can also obey rules like be in fallback or pushback mode to try and open up flanks midline. You can see here these units have no flag. That's because they're dispersed. They are permanently lost and will never rally. They will just move off the map. You want to turn all AI off for a more cinematic look. Alt-Shift, right-click, and you can zoom in to where your mouse is. Here we're starting a new game, starting out in deployment mode. Until I press start, I will remain in deployment mode. I can see the top-down overlay here, and move units more or less instantly while deploying them. Let's start. I'll just move my whole army forward. I will hold Alt and right-click to group move them. I could change their rotation as well, but I don't want to do that here. First moves are always automatic, so long as no combats have resolved, but after that, in order to move a unit immediately, it must be within the command radius of a general. If it is outside the command radius of a general, like these Thoropheroi, it must wait for a courier. Pending waypoints are in red, current waypoints are in green. Hold Control to queue waypoints. I'll do that again here, and you can see that this unit is waiting for a courier because of that envelope icon, and once the courier gets there, it's no longer waiting, and now its previously red waypoints are green. You can see these units are all in adjacency with one another, which means their flanks are protected, and they get a small POA boost. You can change the speed of faster units to help maintain a line as you move forward. I will put some of my units in pushback mode, and some of them in fallback mode, and maybe even move some of them a little bit to help with opening up some gaps mid-line. That should aid me. Here these units have turned to face an attacker coming in at an extreme angle. I'm getting an overlap there because they're waiting on that order. Important to avoid overlap hindrance. These elephants are quite impetuous. They were goaded by my javelin men. Now I've gotten caught in a charge against my pikemen, which is advantageous for me. So it's good to use goading against impetuous units. I could do a manual charge in the rear of these cavalry, but these veterans I saw for I will really chew up my Greek light cav, so I won't do that. But for demonstration purposes, let's do it anyway. You can see them charge in there. Well, they disordered in combat against my pikes, so maybe this rear charge will go okay. Nope, they didn't end up dropping, because note that light units cannot auto-drop non-light units. And there's the outcome there. I had a good chance to win, but not great. So these lances are very high quality. But you see that I have that ordinary flank melee advantage, rather than the auto-drop much larger advantage. Okay. Now the enemy mainline units are starting to come in. Move these Thracitai up to the flank there. You can right-click to move, but it's generally better to right-click and drag move. I'll set these units to fall back to see if I can't get a flank in there. Plug that gap. Move my Thoropheroi to take this flank. These units have evaded, these Greek cavalry, rather than go head on with these pikes, which makes sense for them. But that may open up a flank here for me. Let's see if this flank is available. It is, because these units aren't close enough. You can see enemy adjacency as well with red lines. This gap is too large, and so this pikeman unit number 6, its right flank is open for my white shields to attack. My Thoropheroi are fragmented against these pikemen. That's a bad matchup for me, and they will likely be routed. Now here we have a common scenario where my own routers will route through my spear unit, hindering it, which will give me a disadvantage in this upcoming combat. You see the foot icon there. So now if I click you can see that my spear units are hindered here because of my routing Thoropheroi falling back through them. And so you can see on the last resolved combat, I rated as unsteady aggressive spears 75 and hindered minus 40% final score for only 75 POA total. Whereas my opponent's steady pikes has 200 POA, so they had an overwhelming chance to win. And they did in fact win, and so my unit lost its cohesion test and dropped to disorder. You can, of course, give orders while the game is paused. So I'll bring these white shields back up around here. And I'll bring these Thoropheroi back in to the center. It's likely that this enemy, number 5 here, will rout soon. These enemy Greek light cavalry may line up for a rear charge if I fragment, or even disordered. They know when they can have an advantage, so they're going to run that risk of charging a light unit into a non-light unit, because it's a good flank. Hopefully my general's cavalry there will come back in time to exploit this flank. And it looks like I've won. You win at either 65% of the enemy routed, or at 45% if the gap is greater than or equal to 30. And you can see those numbers here in the top left. So we've defeated the enemy army, but we can continue playing if we want to. You see that my cavalry has taken that charge automatically. So they perceive it's to their advantage, so they want to do so.